All right, my friends, welcome back. Before I say anything at all, I just want to sincerely apologize for that last episode. It was just way too long. I did not realize it was going quite that long in real time. I could tell it was going long. I was thinking probably like an hour and a half, maybe hour and 40, which is definitely pushing it. Way longer than what most of my episodes were being, and I just didn't know it was over 2 hours. And I'm sincerely sorry. That's like longer than a good movie. Ridiculous. And so I apologize. I hope you have grace. You know, there's some YouTubers like Mike Winger. He'll do like 3, 4 hour sessions just on the Bible. I think that's great. That's awesome. But I know that, for my audience, I'm trying to keep things simple and streamlined and manageable. That probably was not the best. And so I'm not going to do that very often. And, you know, I kind of wish I would have done more sessions, but I really didn't want to do that. Maybe I should have put my discussion on labels and the supernatural in this episode. Again, you're just trying to time these things out in your head, and I just didn't think it was going to go that long. So I apologize, I really do, and I am not going to do that on this episode. I'm going to really, it's 8:20 where I'm at. I don't know where you're at right now, wherever you're watching. This isn't live, so it's not going to be the exact same time, or at least not the exact same time on the exact same day, but it is 8:20, and so I'm going to keep a real close eye on this phone, and if I'm not finished with everything I wanted to go through, too bad. I'm just gonna trust in the Lord because I'm not gonna go over about an hour because after last time that was just that was redunculous. That was really redunculous. So I apologize. Please be gracious. Most episodes won't be like that. This episode won't be like this, like that. But tonight I just wanted to go over a couple of really important things to this channel, both my politics and then the Bible translation that we're going to use. Obviously, the second one of those is just as obviously important as can be for this channel. So that's really important. But while this channel is not going to be super fixated on politics, I think it is incumbent upon any Bible teacher to at least give some idea of where they stand on politics because you have, I think, some Christian leaders, some Christian YouTubers maybe focus on politics too much. The Bible's not all about politics, but I think others really try to avoid politics too much. And I think that's an error on the other side. The Bible has a lot to say. Kind of like I said about cars, the Bible has way more to say that pertains to politics than cars. The Bible might not always directly talk about politics. The New Testament especially doesn't give us a lot of direct commands on politics, but it just has so many principles that clearly pertain to politics. And one of my favorite YouTubers is Ali Bestucky, and she talks all the time about how I might not be quoting this exactly right. I think I am. I watch her enough. I should be able to. If I get this slightly wrong, please forgive me. If by some crazy chance she sees this, I hope you will forgive me, Mrs. Stuckey. She often says that politics matter because it affects policy, and policy affects people, and people matter. I don't think that's exactly how she says it, but the idea is that politics affects policy, and policy very much affects people, and that is 100% true. She is 1,000% correct on that, and so we do need to talk about politics. And I'm not going to super focus on politics in this channel. I'll bring up stuff here and there, but I do think it's just important to kind of talk about where I'm coming from, especially because, like I said in my previous session, I just want to avoid. There's no way you're going to avoid all criticism, especially if this YouTube channel becomes bigger than like I'm anticipating it becoming. Then you especially can't avoid all criticism, but hopefully you can just avoid lame criticism. I'm not saying people won't still give lame criticism, but hopefully when people who are even remotely familiar with this channel are confronted with that lame criticism, they're just gonna be like, okay, whatever. And so I just want to be very clear. I've already repeated ad nauseum, like too many times probably at this point, that I'm very conservative politically. I do not hold to third wayism. I do not believe that, the way of the church is to avoid politics as much as possible. Some people in the third way might be like, it's not a fair representation. Kind of think it is. I want to be clear that in general, I side with the Republican Party because the Republican Party, even though there's a lot of messiness in the Republican Party, generally defends biblical values more. For those of you who are true Bible-believing Christians, who might get a lot out of my channel, and you just strongly disagree with me on that point, and you vote Democrat, or you're an independent and you lean Democrat, or you're just like, sometimes I go Democrat, sometimes I go Republican. I'm not really going to kind of take sides. I just want to say that, we can argue about a lot of things, but from a biblical perspective, now you might be like, you haven't defended any of these things. True, but I will as we proceed in this channel. Um, I think most Bible-believing Christians in this country are genuinely finding it harder and harder to be Democrat. And the reason I say that, I know that, like talked about in one of my sessions, and this is still true, there are a lot of older Bible-believing Christians, especially in minority groups, meaning non-white groups, who still often will vote Democrat. And I think they do that more just out of habit and tradition. I'm not trying to say, oh, they're not thinking for themselves, but I do think that sometimes they're not fully paying attention to some of these changes, because let's just be real. Let's just be real, my friends. I'm not trying to overly criticize or make people feel bad. That's just so not my heart. But I mean, the Democratic Party, if we're just being straight up real, has become the party of the A word that I talked about. And by the A word, I don't mean the swear word. I kind of noticed last time that I used that, and people who are just watching the channel for the first time might be like, huh? I meant the A word as I used it in, I believe, session 4. Pretty positive session 4, when I talked about things are not always as they seem. The termination of a pregnancy. I'm not going to say that word because YouTube tends to freak out about that, especially when it's on Christian channels. Just saying. It has become the party of the A word, of euthanasia. It's become the party of what I believe is mutilating of minors. And again, YouTube might freak out about that, but I mean, these are just radically unbiblical positions. So if you're just like, I can't vote for the Republican Party because there's too much racism and sexism and homophobia and all that stuff in there, I think there's some truth to that. I still do think that, and I know some conservatives will be like, you're just being woke. You're just giving them too much. No, no, no. I'm going to be honest. I've seen the Republican Party change a lot from when I first became a Christian. And I do think that there's been more racism and sexism and homophobia injected into the party. I'm just going to be honest. In certain quarters, I don't think that's true of most Republicans. I'm not at all trying to, I know you might be like, boy, you're not making any friends in this channel. My goal in this channel is to tell the truth, to be biblical. It's not to make friends. I mean, I want to have friends. I like having friends. I want to especially be friends with Christians, but I'm always going to, I've talked about it in previous sessions, I call balls and strikes. I'm going to tell it like it is. And I am not trying to slander other people who are Republican. I'm not, especially my brothers and sisters in Christ. But in certain quarters of the Republican Party, yeah, you just get a sense of there's just more of that stuff. So on that hand, I get it. But at the very least, I think you should say I cannot vote Democrat. And I just think that those things are problems in the Republican Party, and we should try to weed them out of them, and weed them out of the party. Not that I'm part of the Republican Party. I have left the Republican Party because of some of those nasty things that I have seen, I think, become more prevalent in the party. So if you don't want to be part of the Republican Party, I'm with you. I'm not. I left the Republican Party, but I don't think it is good to always not vote. I think that just gives the other side, that just allows them to take over the country, and that's not what we want as Bible-believing Christians. I think there's a time and a place to, if you might be like, okay, so you're not a registered Republican, but you always vote Republican. No, I don't. I'll give you an example. Mitt Romney, and Mitt Romney is not what I'm talking about. He is not racist. He's not sexist. He's not homophobic, but he is not truly conservative in certain areas. And so I became very frustrated with Mitt Romney. And so my election here in Utah for senator, I did not vote for Romney. I sat that election out. I was not going to, certainly wasn't going to vote Democrat, but I just could not stomach voting for Romney. So no, I don't always vote Republican. Having said that, I think in general, it's not good to sit out most votes for most offices. And I think if we are going to make the choice to vote, as much as we might have to be frustrated with the Republican Party, and I am frustrated with the Republican Party, I just think that it just does. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. Like, it just does support biblical values more than the other party. And I know some of you might have just been told completely the opposite, that the Democratic Party is the one that is about feeding the poor and reaching the marginalized and loving people, all the things that Jesus did. It's more of the Jesus party. Most of that's just nonsense. I'm sorry. It's just made up. It's just made up. The Democratic Party wants you to think that so that they can get you to give them a lot of their money, and then they just waste most of the money. I mean, actually do some of your own research. I'm not saying you have to. If you're just watching this channel and you're going to kind of use me as someone to teach, that's fine. Although I've said you should test me on certain things just to make sure that you're not just like becoming a little drone of me. And I don't think most people would ever do that. I'm just saying some can become overly loyal to a teacher. You should test me, but I am just saying, if you're ever, really want to look into these matters more, do some research. I mean, I'm not saying the Republican Party doesn't often waste money to do really stupid things. Again, I don't want to, I want to be clear. I did not come up with this saying. Don't want to take credit. Like I tried to rightfully give Ali Bestucky credit for that saying that I agree with earlier, although I think I botched exactly how she says it. I did not come up with this statement. I can't remember which politician did. I think he is a Republican, but this is kind of my sentiment right now with politics. And I did not always feel this way. I did not always feel this way when I was early on as a Christian. I think the Republican Party has kind of become the party of stupid. And I think the Democratic Party has really become the party of evil. And if I have to choose between stupid and evil, I'm going to choose stupid. Because evil is far more detrimental. Evil has far more horrible effects for our country and more importantly, for the church. And so I think most younger people, I think there's a stereotype that all minorities all vote Democrat. That's not true. This last election, Donald Trump, who a lot of minorities really don't like. I personally don't like Donald Trump very much at all. But a lot of younger people voted because they saw that, the Democratic Party doesn't have their back the way that they think. And, a lot of times you get told that a certain policy is going to help the poor so many times, it's told you repeatedly that you just automatically think, well, duh. And it can be very comforting because if all I have to do is help the poor, I don't actually have to go out and help feed the homeless. And I'm not saying plenty of liberals don't do things like that. Many do. But I am just saying, I know a lot of liberals, a lot of Democrats who it's very comforting to be like, I don't actually have to do those things. I have a very busy life, but I can still feel really good about myself because all I have to do is go into a voting box and check a box, and the party will do all those loving things for me. The problem is, actually do some research. Actually do some research. In the last 60 years, most democratic policies that have been meant to help minorities and help the poor, and if you are a minority or if you are someone who struggles financially, I'm asking you to look into these things. It doesn't mean you have to love the Republican Party or love everything about conservatives. I'm not saying that at all. Most of those policies in the long term have been horrible for minorities, have been horrible for the poor. And so as Bible-believing Christians, when Jesus tells us to love the poor, he doesn't mean just vote for a party that tells you that they're going to love the poor for you. He means you go out and love the poor. You go out and give them money. You go out and give them food. You go out and sit next to them and talk to them and preach the gospel to them. Something that I have done. I'm not going to go into that in a lot of detail because it's going to come off as very self-serving, but that is something I have done. And so I just want to be very, very clear about that. All right, one thing, I'm super not going to do a lot of housekeeping items today, but it just popped in my head, something I wanted to clarify. In my last video, I just watched it before I ate some dinner to get some rest after what was a very long video to teach on. At one point, I put independence on the board. I'm sure that was a laughable moment. I hope you got a good laugh out of it. I don't say this to whatever, but I've been teaching a long time. I write and whatever. I'm generally speaking a pretty good speller. And so I know how to spell independence. It's not something that like someone watched the video and told me about. Sometimes I just get going too fast. I'm not sure what happened there. As soon as I saw the video, I was like, what? Oftentimes I abbreviate things. I will misspell things here and there. A word I always laugh at is, no matter how many times I've read the Bible and I've read theology and the word comes up a lot, this is the word Sadducee. If you know what that is, it was a group of Jewish, in the Jewish community at the time of Jesus. We'll get much more into them later. I can never spell Sadducee right. It's very sad, but I can never spell Sadducee correctly. So I'm not saying I'm a perfect speller, but that was, if you're just like, Dan portrays himself as like this knowledgeable person and he can't even spell a basic word. It was just, I get going too fast. I know how to spell independent. If you're like, oh, maybe he was abbreviating because he abbreviates stuff sometimes. Nope, I really wasn't. It was just bad. So anyways, just wanted to say that. But let's get back more into the main topic. I hope you got a good laugh out of that. I was laughing at myself. All right. I am not going to spend a lot of time on why I have my political views in this session other than what I've already said. If you want to really get into why I hold to the political views that I hold to, I recommend two really good authors or speakers. Okay, the first would be Ben Shapiro, who I've talked about. Okay, and the second would be Thomas Sowell. Okay, Ben Shapiro and Thomas Sowell. Neither one of these guys are Bible-believing Christians. Ben Shapiro is very openly an Orthodox Jew. I'm not sure where Thomas Sowell kind of stands on religion. He's not really super open about it. You might be, well, I think then he might be a Bible-believing Christian. You shouldn't judge. I just don't get that vibe from him in his speaking engagements or in his writings. My guess is he is kind of a liberal Protestant religiously and theologically, despite leaning fairly conservative politically. Thomas Sowell does not cover sort of politics from a really broad, overarching standpoint as much as Ben Shapiro does. If you actually don't just watch his show, Ben Shapiro's show is very good, it's very entertaining, but he's kind of doing what I'm doing on my channel. He's kind of really trying to distill things down, keep things basic, but then he'll make mistakes on things here and there, which people love to harp on and say, see, Ben's not actually that smart, he doesn't actually know what he's talking about. Okay, we all make mistakes, and he's not perfect, just like we're all not perfect. But if you actually read his books, if you actually listen to his actual speaking engagements, if you actually really interact with Ben, Ben is a really smart dude, and he is a really well-read guy. He's a very good debater. He on most issues, he really knows what he's talking about. And if you're like, well, you just go by whatever he says, I don't. A lot of times I'm like, dude, I don't know, Ben. I'm not so sure on that one. And then I'll go and do my own research, and after a few days, I'll be like, man, Ben's kind of right again. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes I'm like, kind of have a disagreement, or a little bit more nuance is needed on that particular subject or topic. But boy, I really have tested Ben out many times. And I know a lot of people in the conservative movement, or the so-called conservative movement. And again, this is why I'm hesitant to just like be super tribal or like be a registered Republican, or because there's a lot of people in the so-called conservative movement that are not actually that conservative. They're more into what's known as populism. Populism is really kind of telling people what they want to hear. So a person might be vaguely or generally conservative on a lot of things, but then on a lot of topics where they really should just tell people the truth, even though it might make them less popular, they just tell people what they want to hear. And Trump, I'm just going to be honest, and a lot of people might come after me, go after me in the comments. I don't care. I just don't care. I don't care. I'm not trying to win fans here. I'm really not. Trump is a populist. He's much more of a populist than he is conservative. And you might be like, are you saying that you didn't vote for Trump? Okay, let's be clear. I didn't vote for Trump in 2016 because I just didn't trust the guy. I still don't trust the guy. I don't like the guy. All right, and I know a lot of Christians are very diehard Trump fans because he has done a lot of really good things for the conservative movement politically in this country and for the church. I'm very grateful to Trump as a politician for many of the things that he's done. I have an essay on my website. You can read that to get more of my feel for Trump. I'm very complimentary of Trump about what he did in many things, but I didn't trust him at all in 2016. I did not vote for Hillary Clinton. I voted for third party, a guy who seemed pretty conservative, but didn't have much of a chance. I absolutely voted for him in 2020. Didn't like the guy. Did not want to vote. I wished one of the other Republican candidates had won in the I wish it didn't have to be Trump, because again, he didn't get really challenged in 2020 because he was already president. But I wish it didn't have to be Trump. But I really, I voted for Trump. I really wished he would have won. I was not happy when Biden won because I knew he was going to be more liberal than he portrayed himself as being, and he was. And then in 2024, I very enthusiastically voted for Trump as a politician, not as a person. And so again, you keep saying how you're so conservative, you're not liberal. I'm conservative. I'm not a populist, though. I am conservative. And I have an essay on my website talking about what true conservatism really is. And you can read that if you want. And it is important we not conflate or overly try to confuse populism with conservatism, because they're not the same thing. And Trump really is not that great of a guy. And I know that a lot of Christians are like, well, I have a hard time being excited about him as a politician if he's a really bad person. So I think a lot of Christians sort of knowingly, or maybe unknowingly in some cases, try to gloss over some of his past and some of the things that he says and does. And I don't think that's healthy. And I know a lot of Christians are like, well, he's a baby Christian, so just give him a lot of grace. My friends, I'm sorry, if you're new to politics or you're new to Christianity, that argument might hold weight with you. You got to understand. I know I keep saying I've been walking with the Lord for so long, but I have. I've been walking with the Lord for 25 years. I've been in the political scene or very much participating in politics for 25 years. I've been watching Trump for the past 10 years, and I have been hearing certain Christians say that he's a baby Christian for 10 years. At some point, you're not a baby Christian anymore. So if he's truly saved, we're going to see fruit of that. And so far, I have not seen any fruit that would lead me to believe that he is a true Bible believing Christian. If you're like, that is so harsh and so judgmental, you don't know somebody's heart. I'm not saying I know his heart. I'm not saying that I know with infallible certainty that he's not a Christian. I'm just saying he's not somebody that I could very openly accept as a brother or sister in Christ because I just have no real strong evidence for that. Again, if you actually read, some of the books that have been written on him, you might be like, they're all just liberal and biased. Okay, a lot of them are liberal, a lot of them are biased, but most of them are not just going to make up certain facts. I mean, some of them will make up certain things or twist things. I understand there's a lot of distrust among conservatives, but there's just a lot of evidence that he still is just very foul-mouthed, very, let's say, not the highest view of women, a lot of things that really, whatever. So I think a lot of Christians try to bury those things, ignore those things, because it makes them not feel so contradictory about being pumped about him as a politician. I just don't have as big a problem with that. I am okay being very grateful for many, not all, because there's some things like the tariffs, and if you support tariffs, fine. I think they're just so dumb. I think they're so not just bad policy, just dumb policy, and I think they're really hurting this country, and I think they're hurting his presidency and hurting the conservative movement, and thus could potentially hurt the church in this country long term. So certainly not all, but a lot of what he has done, I am all for as a Bible-believing Christian. And for those I know who just viscerally hate Trump, hate everything about him, to some level, I get it. I don't like the guy as a person. And I don't like a lot about the Republican Party. I don't like a lot about what gets called conservative in this country. And you should just know that. But again, I come back to, I really don't think that you're actually thinking through fully what it means to be a Democrat or a liberal in this country. Terminations of pregnancies, that is a very evil, evil thing. And people might be like, well, that's anti-women, that helps women. No, it doesn't. There's so many lies about, please watch Ali Beth Stuckey. Please watch Lila Rose. I don't recommend Lila Rose across the board because she's Catholic. She's not solid theologically, but on politics, especially when it comes to the A word, she's exposes so many of the lies that come from the Democratic Party. And I'm sorry, my friends, they are lies. You have been lied to. The Democratic Party is kind of like a cult of death. And I'm not trying to be overly harsh. The Republican Party is the party of stupid. They just do things that I'm just like, oh, it's so hard to be a conservative sometimes in our day. But that doesn't mean that just because Trump can be really awful and the conservative movement and the Republican Party are far less than pretty, that we should just ignore the things in the Democratic Party. So all that to say is, I really have very serious problems with both parties, but I do think that if you are actually willing to take a step back, be objective, and understand that neither party is anywhere close to perfect, that the Republican Party in most instances is the better option. And so in 2024, I very enthusiastically voted for Trump. I honestly would think that it was wrong, and I know that might sound really strong to a lot of people. I really do. I really think it would have been wrong to vote for anyone other than Trump in 2024. Our country needed Trump, who is a fighter. Yeah, he fights for a lot of bad things and a lot of stupid things, and it just frustrates me, but he fights for a lot of conservative things. He fights for the church oftentimes. Right now, he's really trying to protect Nigerian Christians. Now, his motives might not be, he might just be doing it to be popular amongst Christians. I think there's some truth to that. Again, I'm not trying to be really hard on the guy. For you diehard Trump fans, but I'm just not a big fan. And I've heard Christians be like, I like that he's so just straight talk. Like, okay, I'm fine for straight talk. I try to be about straight talk. There's a difference between straight talk and being firm and just being arrogant and pompous and mean. And he is those things. And if you're just like, no, he's not, you're just so woke and liberal. I'm anything but woke. I'm anything but liberal. I've made that clear. I'm a huge fan of Ben Shapiro and Thomas Sowell. Come on. I mean, if you don't know who these guys are, you can look into them, but give me a break. I'm not woke. I'm not liberal. I hate wokeism with a passion. And he fights. His motives might not always be in the best place, but he fights for conservative values. He fights for the church. And so I was elated when he won. And I texted my pastor that. You can ask my pastor that. He can testify to that. So I am hardly third way. I am hardly apolitical. But on the other hand, I'm not going to be diehard Trump, even though I know a lot of people in the church want me to be. They see him as kind of this great political leader of the church, and I get that because he does fight for the church in many cases, but I think it's dangerous to not be honest about Trump. So I just say all that so you know where I'm coming from, and to reiterate, I am not going to just be overly tribal. I'm not just going to take the position that people want me to take. I am very grateful for much, certainly not all, of what Trump has done as a politician. I am so grateful that he was elected rather than Kamala Harris, which I think would have been so bad for our country, so bad for our culture, and so bad for the church. And that's not because she's a woman. It's not because she's black. Don't put words in my mouth. I don't appreciate it. I really thought that Condoleezza Rice would have been a wonderful president. That is a black woman. She's Presbyterian, which is pretty cool. So again, I'm going to admit my bias on that, but even if she was a Presbyterian, she's a Bible-believing Christian. She's very conservative. Truly brilliant woman. So again, don't give me that nonsense. Now, she didn't have a chance in 2008 because Bush was so unpopular and she was closely tied to Bush. I'm not saying she was perfect in her various positions that she held in the Bush administration, but just a brilliant, very capable woman that I think would have been a great president. I would have voted for Condoleezza Rice in a heartbeat. I did not vote for Kamala Harris because she has horrible, horrible, unbiblical policies. So I just want to be clear. That's where I stand on Trump and Trumpism and conservatism and all those types of things. And I know Ben Shapiro is not popular in certain pockets of this so-called conservative movement because he just tells it like it is. And he's not a populist. He's not gonna just whatever. He's gotten a little too Trumpy for my taste as time has gone on. And I think he does that because, he wants to be grateful for what Trump has done. But even to this day, he will still be very critical of Trump at times. He'll even kind of make fun of him. Not that I think it's great to make fun of people, but I at least like that he's not just so sold out for Trump that he's just going to say whatever the Trumpies want him to say. If you are part of the church, I know there's a lot of white, I'm not trying to make things about race, I'm just being real. I will always be real on this channel, whether it's popular or not. I know there's a lot of white Christians in the Old South or in rural parts of the country. I'm not trying to stereotype. I'm not saying that's all Christians in those areas or that there's no Christians outside of those areas or there's demographics that wouldn't fit this bill. But I'm just saying that can be very, very diehard Trump. And I just think that sometimes the blinders are on a little bit, that Trump can be a very nasty person. If there's evidence that like a few months ago he truly received Christ and he's just kind of struggling to get some of those long held sins out of his system, I'd be fine with that. Where's the evidence of that? Tell me who this person is that prayed with him and that he prayed this prayer and does he ever come out and say that? I mean, like just very recently at the Charlie Kirk funeral, I know that was like a few months ago, he talked about how he hates his enemies. Well, Jesus said we have to love our enemies. Now, again, if you're like, well, he just didn't fully understand, he's a baby Christian, fine. I'm just saying, I'm going by what I'm seeing. And when someone says that, I'm going, that doesn't sound very Christian. I have no evidence that he actually received Christ in a prayer recently. So I'm just not going to put the blinders on. So that's just me being real in this channel. Let me check the time real quick because I am not going to go forever tonight. All right. I just want to talk about how really quickly, I'm going to go through these issues really fast. Like I said, I do not want to go on forever tonight. I want you to know, I really want you to know, if you're going to be a regular on my channel, I might not talk about politics all the time, but just be aware if you're trying to navigate the political world from a biblical perspective, both sides lie constantly. And I know even people who I'm big fans of on YouTube might be like, I don't know if you should have said that. That's a little strong. Nope, I'm going to say it because it's true. Both sides lie constantly. I'll give you an example from the right. This whole narrative that Trump won the 2020 election, no, he didn't. I'm sorry. The evidence does not point to that. It's flat out. And you can be like, you're just woke. You're just giving the liberals. No, I'm going by the facts. I've researched this. I've looked into it. Every single piece of evidence that people try to bring forward is just a bunch of baloney. It has no merit to it whatsoever. He did not win the 2020 election. I'm not denying the fact there were shenanigans that went on. I'm not denying the fact that the Democratic Party was very dirty and underhanded in a way that it went about things. I'm not saying there were not things that were really bad from an optics standpoint, but he did not lose. He did not win that election. He lost. He lost. He lost that election. That's reality. And yet to this day, many people in the Republican Party or the so-called right or the so-called conservative movement, again, I believe in genuine, true American conservatism. And you can read about that on my essay on my website. I'm not going to go along with populism. I really hate populism. I think it's problematic. They will get so upset, like, you're not towing the party line. You just sound like a liberal. And I get that. I get that from people all the time, and it's so frustrating because oftentimes I'm more conservative than those people on the issues that really matter, and they're just not very well read on those issues or don't understand those issues. They're just like, you just don't sound conservative enough. I can't tell you how many times so-called conservative people have said that to me, or even fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, and it's really a bummer because it's just ridiculous. It's not about sounding conservative. It's about the truth. It's about what does God's word say and how do we interpret the political world according to the Bible. And so I'm not looking to sound conservative or liberal. I just am very conservative because I actually think through these things and I don't just repeat party lines. All right. He lost the 2020 election. He just did. It's an objective fact that he lost. So there you go. On the liberal side, I have just been shocked about the lies about Charlie Kirk. I mean, just shocked. Charlie Kirk was a hero of the faith. I want to be clear about that. Hero of the faith. Absolute hero of the faith. I probably was not as big of a fan of Charlie Kirk as a lot of people in the church. I was a fan. I greatly appreciate the work that he did. I meant what I just said. He was a hero of the faith. And yes, he was martyred. Those who try to deny his martyrdom based on the lies that I'm going to talk about in a minute, including within the church, unfortunately, some segments within the church who lean more liberal politically but are still Bible-believing Christians. But he was too Trumpy for my taste. He was way too Trumpy for my taste. I was not a fan of that aspect, and I think he was way too soft on Roman Catholicism. I think he was way too soft on the LDS Church. And I do think that that's, just as a little tangent here, please stick with me, I think it's a real danger in the church. And I really hope you'll take this point seriously, my friends. I understand that as our country and our culture and our society becomes more anti-religion, I use religion as I talked about in one of my previous sessions, oftentimes for lack of a better word, but really against people who believe in spiritual matters, whether they're Bible-believing Christians or not. As our country becomes more pagan and more secular and more atheist and more agnostic, I understand people can feel scared and defensive, and it's like we just want to just band together with anybody who seems even close to us. And it's like, why would we be critical of Roman Catholics when they believe in Jesus and they're basically the same as us, and we can get together politically, and I understand the pull of that. And I am fine to work with Catholics and LDS people politically, I really am. But it's dangerous when we're so worried about offending them because maybe they won't be as on board with us politically that we're unwilling to tell them the truth. Because Roman Catholicism and LDS is not the same. It's not. Those are different religions, flat out. And we need to be honest about that. J.D. Vance, if he runs in 2028 and he ends up being the Republican nominee, I will vote for J.D. Vance, despite his Catholicism. I will vote for him wholeheartedly. But we should still be honest about the fact that his Catholicism is leading him to hell. Many conservatives are huge Glenn Beck fans. It's like, and Ben Shapiro himself considers Glenn Beck kind of a mentor. I always found that odd because I think Ben Shapiro's way smarter, way more well-read than Glenn Beck, but maybe from some stylistic kind of getting more notice perspective, Ben considers him a mentor. First of all, Glenn Beck just says a lot of ridiculous things, just going to be honest, even from a political standpoint. But even if he didn't, if he was rock solid, right on the money on everything, the fact that he's LDS means we need to preach the gospel to him. And we need to be honest with him. And we need to be careful. You might be like, okay, a lot of people just want to join with him politically. Yes and no. I mean, I'll give you an example. A while back, this was quite a while back, but he did like this rally in Washington, D.C., and it was really held as this political rally. It wasn't a religious rally. And so like you had Catholics, you had Bible-believing Christians, you had LDS people, you had others who came to this. You may not even have had atheists and others who are politically conservative. And that's fine. I would have been fine with that. But then he got up and he said a prayer and he started talking about Jesus and the Christianity. And at that point, it's becoming very religious. And it's like, I would be very uncomfortable, excuse me, to be at a rally like that. Because I don't want people to think that I hold to the same faith that he does, that I believe in the same Jesus that he does. So I just sometimes worry about when the conservative movement can sometimes try to blur these lines because we're so worried about the conservative movement. I want this country to be conservative politically because I believe that when this country is conservative politically, it protects the church. That is my number one goal, is the church, not this country. I love this country. I'm very patriotic, but I also worry that sometimes many Christians, sometimes I think, can turn our country into an idol. And we should always be church first, country second. Now, we should be country first in the sense in comparison to all other countries in the world. America first, I'm all for that. Within reason, within reason. Sometimes people can take that a wee bit too far. But we should be church first. But I am very conservative politically because I believe that is what is best for the church. However, having said that, the gospel takes precedence over political matters. It just does. And we need to not fudge on the gospel. We need not to blur the gospel and gray the gospel. Roman Catholics and the LDS Church need us to tell them the gospel. And so these are some areas where I get concerned about things politically. That does not mean that I'm like this closet liberal or that I'm third way or any of that stuff. Like I said, I literally enthusiastically voted for Trump in 2024. I was elated. I was so relieved that he won. And I really would have considered it wrong, sin on some sense. That's a strong statement. That's not third wayism to say that, to vote other than that. And for those that I know that might offend or they'll never watch my channel again, I think you're not really looking at things from a really biblical perspective. I really, really don't. So I do want to say that I really don't like it when so-called conservatives are just not willing to tell it like it is. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I want to say anytime I say something negative about somebody, generally speaking, I just try not to say bad things about people, like people that I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, or people that I don't know that well, you know, generally speaking, I only try to say positive things. But when we have very famous, very influential people, sometimes it is our duty as people who are trying to teach the Bible, especially to those that are new to Christianity or new to the faith or new to church life, so on and so forth. Sometimes we have to call out leaders who are very influential and say, they're just wrong. They're just dangerous. They're just detrimental. I just want you to know, I don't ever think that I am better than those people in the sense that, like, had Jesus not changed my heart, that I might believe some of the same things that they believe, or I might believe things worse, or I might do things that are worse. That's really what Jesus is getting at when he says, do not judge or you shall be judged. He's saying, don't ever think that you're better than anybody as a Christian. To whatever extent we do believe and do things that are better than the world, it is only because Jesus has changed us through the Holy Spirit. I will call out certain people in this channel because Jesus called people out. The prophets called people out. The apostles called people out. Church leaders like Apollos called people out. I mean, we have to be firm about some of these things. And it really bothers me when the conservative movement becomes so tribal that we can't call out other conservatives because we're worried about fracturing the conservative movement. Shapiro's talked about this a lot. And you might be like, boy, you really are just a disciple of Shapiro. I'm not. I disagree with him strongly on religious matters, and I very often disagree with him on political matters. I just talked about how he's way too Trumpy as time has gone on for me. I don't like it. I just don't like being so positive about Trump as a person. So I do have my disagreements, but I do agree with him that we need to call people out. And, you know, people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Laura Loomer, Nick Fuentes, some of the, and I'm not saying all of those are equal. Nick Fuentes, for example, is way worse than the rest of them. I would say Tucker Carlson is probably the least bad out of all of those. But I am just saying there are a lot of voices that are very influential in the conservative movement that shouldn't be. They shouldn't be. These guys are wackos. They're nuts, and they say things that are just dumb and are not true. And I know a lot of people, you mean Tucker Carlson? Yes, I mean Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson has said things about Russia and Ukraine that have had profound effects upon the conservative movement that are just factually incorrect, that are just nonsense. That doesn't mean we have to be pro-Ukraine about everything. I'm well aware of the fact that there's a lot of corruption in Ukraine. I'm very well aware of the fact. And as we work with Ukraine, we should demand that they clean some of that up. But the idea that Putin is the good guy, the idea that Russia is this great Christian country, no, it's not. Most of Russia is very secular, and the Russian Orthodox Church has done some really, really shady things in order to try to push Russian Orthodoxy. And as Bible-believing Christians, we should understand Russian Orthodoxy is part of the Eastern Orthodox Church that denies the gospel and is absolutely dripping with idolatry. You can say that's judgmental and that's harsh, and we shouldn't say that all you want, but it is true. Okay. Now, I understand that Ukraine is mostly Eastern Orthodox as well. I'm just saying that this idea that Russia is this great Christian nation, I'm not saying Ukraine is this great Christian nation, although there is an underground church of true evangelicals that is growing much faster than anything that we see in Russia. Okay. Russia often persecutes Bible-believing Christians. So I'm just, giving you some examples that I am very conservative, but I have want nothing to do with the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owens, the Laura Loomers, the Nick Fuenteses of this world. And Laura Loomer still has Trump's ear on a lot of things, which is just really sad. This is just really sad. I don't know what happened to Candace Owens. I really don't. She was actually not perfect. I had my disagreements with her on a lot of things. But, it was overall, she's a very intelligent woman. I would still say that of her to this day. But something happened. I don't know. She went off the rails, and I don't think we need to just call it like it is. And I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm not trying to get clicks or views. I think you can tell by the way I run my channel. I'm hardly like Mr. Polish, like trying to get clicks and views guy. I take no pleasure in saying this, but Candace Owens is a nut. She is a straight up nut. And if you are into that, my friend, please pray. Please take that to the Lord, and the Lord will show you. You should not be listening to people like Candace Owens. Now, again, if you want to listen to Candace Owens for research purposes or to refute her or whatever, that's fine. I don't have fear of you watching Candace Owens. I have nothing to fear because she just says a bunch of baloney. I am just saying it's not healthy to watch a lot of Candace Owens for entertainment or because you're trying to get actual concrete political information from her. She has lost her mind, and that's not me being mean or harsh saying that. She's lost her mind. And so I am going to be honest about both political issues and theological issues on this channel, and you should just be aware of that. I am much more into those who actually are willing to research and actually be calm and reasonable and think through these things very carefully, like Thomas Sowell and like Ben Shapiro. Thomas Sowell is probably even more thorough than Ben Shapiro when he does go into a particular issue. I mean, he will research something to death, which is a good thing. I don't mean that in a criticism. But like I said, if you're looking for a more robust political vantage point, Ben Shapiro is usually pretty solid. And for those who want to criticize and be like, you really don't know what you're talking about because Ben gets a lot wrong. A lot of people who say those things have not actually read much of Ben, have not actually taken him seriously, who mostly just go by his channel where his actual the Ben Shapiro show, where he is trying to kind of simplify things for the larger audience, and he might make a mistake here about a particular number or misspeak or whatever. We all do that. You can nitpick about those things. Ben Shapiro knows what he's talking about. He's a very smart dude, and he's very courageous because he's taking a lot of hits within the conservative movement. That's a good thing because the conservative movement is becoming messy. So just want to be clear about that. Once more, going to check the time. All right, I still got about 20 minutes. I am determined to keep this within an hour. Christian nationalism, that is something that you oftentimes hear in our day and age, and I just think it's important for me to quickly go over that. All right. The problem with this term is that you ask any 5 people and you're going to get 5 different definitions. So, I mean, it's really hard for me to say I'm a Christian nationalist or not, because no matter what, if I say yes or no, people are going to misinterpret. So, am I a Christian? You better believe it. Am I a nationalist in the sense that I'm a very patriotic person? Do I believe in America first? Yes. I do not believe in this world politics type of thing. Again, I think that I don't believe in isolationism. I know that's become very popular within conservative circles. That is not a sustainable position. It's never been sustainable in the entire history of the world. Get over it. Doesn't work. It's nonsense. I mean, I don't really need to give much more of a refutation than that. We should not be isolationist. At the same time, yeah, I agree. We should not enter into silly wars. The war in Afghanistan was actually a worthwhile war. I know that's become unpopular. The war in Iraq was not a good decision. We rushed into that. It was not thought out. A lot of it had to do with Dick Cheney, who I think was not a great character. Was not good for the conservative movement. But I do believe in America first in the sense that none of us can save the world. That is the job of Jesus Christ. It's not your job, it's not my job, it's not even the church's job. It's the church's job to preach the gospel to the world, but none of us can save. And so I know this concept is so unpopular in liberal circles, but yes, we should try to love all people as much as we can, but we can actually do much more good. We can actually be much more loving by being much more focused on certain people. And then the entire world will be a much better place. Okay? What I mean by that is like, as a parent, it is your duty. It is your duty to love your own children more than you love your neighbor's children. And the idea that that's somehow wrong or like is like a bigoted, conservative or Christian vantage point is ridiculous. It would be wrong. I would be insulting my children if I loved one of my neighbor's kids more than them. I mean, these are common sense things, all right? I can do a much better job of taking care of my living space because I have much more vested into that. But that helps everybody. When one house in the neighborhood is just in shambles, it's not good for the entire neighborhood. All right. And so every nation has a duty to be most focused upon that nation. All right. Yes, we should help other nations. We should work with other nations. Certainly, as Christians, we should love other Christians in other nations even more than we love our fellow Americans. That is just a fact. And sometimes I think that's lost on conservative Christians. But in general, if that's what you mean by nationalism, then I'm a nationalist. And if you want to put those two together, then I'm a Christian nationalist. The problem is, in a lot of liberal circles, as soon as you say you're a Christian nationalist, then they'll say, oh, you mean white Christian nationalism, which means a very racist, nasty, heretical, evil form of Christianity, which is no Christianity at all. And obviously, I reject that. I reject that wholeheartedly. So it's just a sticky term. Or a lot of Christian nationalists, those who are actually not white Christian nationalists and are being falsely accused of racism, will say things like they believe that the government should be more explicitly Christian and we should move more in kind of a theocracy direction. They might not always use that term. If you don't know what that term is, please look it up. But they'll say that, and again, I'm not about that. I'm very much in line with Ben Shapiro. I'm a very strong advocate of freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press. I do not want the church shoving itself down the throats of other people and doing that through the government or otherwise. I don't think is biblical. I really don't. So if that's what you mean by Christian nationalist, then I'm not. But if you mean someone who is a Christian, and is unashamedly so, who is a nationalist in the sense that they're very patriotic and unashamedly so, and who believes in trying to spread the gospel through cultural means like YouTube or like entertainment, or even political means when it comes to like the A word. That is not something that just Christians should be emphatic about. Other groups like Catholics and others can very much be on board with those things. But as Christians, we certainly should be emphatic in fighting against those things. And so we can rally the church to really get to the voting booth and try to tell people about how evil this is. So I am all for trying to expand Christianity through cultural means. And so in that sense, yes, I am a Christian nationalist. But again, I don't like it when the government is becoming too closely tied to the church. I do believe that those two should be independent, not completely separate, like they don't talk to each other, work with each other. I don't like the phrase separation of church and state for that reason, but they certainly should be distinguished and fairly independent of each other. The church should certainly try to influence the government for the reasons I talked about. Politics matter because policy matters, because people matter. But I do think we need to be careful. So that's just a term that people use. I don't know what else more to say about that. That's just something I felt I needed to address on this channel, and that's kind of where I stand on that. So you could call me a Christian nationalist if you defined it a certain way, but the way that a lot of people define it, especially those on the far left or the far right, as being kind of white, racist Christian nationalism, I not only don't want anything to do with that, I hate that. I hate white Christian nationalism. It is so heretical. It is a slander of our Lord Jesus Christ. I want nothing to do with it. I just think it's vile filth. So I just want to be very, very clear about that. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about that very much ties into politics is LGBT issues. All right. Um, Obviously, I know this is a LGBTQ plus to give the full acronym, although sometimes you see longer ones. I usually say LGBT or LGBT plus, not at all because I'm trying to be insulting, but sometimes the acronym can get extremely long. Sometimes people disagree on what should go in and what the meaning of each letter is. So, but I'll use LGBTQ plus for today since that tends to be pretty common. Okay, I just want to say that I do not hate. I do not hate people in the LGBT movement. I don't. And I am not even accusing most LGBT people who profess to be LGBT people of accusing me of that. I have LGBT friends who are totally fine with me and are like, look, we just disagree on religion. We disagree on politics, but you're a cool guy and that's fine. But I am saying that there is a narrative on a lot of the left, the political left, that tries to say, and there's just no talking to them. There's no argument. There's no debate that Bible-believing Christians just hate, like actually hate LGBT people. And I just want you to know that I don't. And no matter how much anybody tries to portray me as that, I don't. I am friends with some LGBT people. I have been friends with LGBT people throughout my entire Christian walk. It wasn't always called LGBT. There was like gay and lesbian, and then other things were added. But I've always had friends that have called themselves gay or bisexual, or different terms were used before transgender became the main term today. But I've known people that would call themselves something along those lines, and I very much disagree with the lifestyle choices that you're making because of the Bible. And I know people say it's not a lifestyle choice. I was born this way. This is how I am. This is my identity. You cannot question that. I don't know what to say. I simply disagree. I am not denying that some people are innately attracted to the opposite gender from a very, very young age. I'm not denying that. But I do think that the issue is far more complicated than that, both biblically and just scientifically from what we know from sociology. There are a lot of people that don't develop those attractions until later in life. There's a lot of people who don't develop those attractions until certain events have taken place in their life. There are those, people oftentimes talk about a spectrum, and people kind of move around on that spectrum. So even within LGBTQ plus ideology and that worldview, they will oftentimes talk about how people are on a spectrum. So I think what people often hear, and maybe some Christians have unfortunately don't understand all these issues. Again, we got to remember, not everybody can be an expert in everything. And a lot of Bible-believing Christians are just simple people trying to go by what the Bible says. So there might be some truth that people might not fully understand these things. But I think what sometimes people are hearing is that we're saying you don't actually have these attractions, that you're just making the whole thing up. And I just want to be honest with you that that's not me. I'm not saying that. I understand that people have those attractions, but what you need to understand is that the Bible would look at things differently than the way you're looking at them. And I'm just saying, maybe be open to what the Bible has to say, because the Bible would say that we have a sinful nature from the moment we are conceived, not just born, conceived in our mother's wombs. And that sinful nature causes us to have sinful desires and to do sinful things. And I am not just picking on this community. I'm talking about people who struggle with lust towards the, I think earlier I might have said attraction to the opposite gender. I meant to say same gender. I apologize for that. But that who really struggle with lust towards the opposite gender. That struggle with anger issues, who struggle with lying. And those desires often can lead to actions, to what we would call as theologians actual sins. So just because you have those desires does not mean, and even if there's not because of certain circumstances in your life, although sometimes that happens, and your side should be open about that, just as we should be open about the fact that sometimes, in rare cases, people have these attractions just sort of innately from a very young age. the Bible would say that's a result of the sinful nature. And the sinful nature does not always manifest itself in the same exact ways in each person. All right, I don't struggle with certain sins, never have my whole life, that other people struggle with. And those people don't struggle with sins that I've struggled with since I was a very, very young child. So it's important to understand the Bible just has a different explanation for why you have those desires. It's not denying those desires, all right? And the Bible would say that Jesus can deliver you from those desires just like he can deliver any of us, all right? Now, sometimes when a person who has same sex or same gender desires becomes a Christian, God just completely takes those away. Sometimes he gives them sexual desires for the opposite gender, the opposite sex, and they can get married and have a normal, pretty normal Christian life. And that does happen. I know people might be like, no, that doesn't happen. I'm telling you, it does. It does. And more often than you think. Okay, I've been in the church a long time, as I've talked about. It happens more often than you think. But that's not always true for everybody. Now, some people are what those in this worldview would call bi, all right, where they have attraction to both. Many times, a person like that will be saved, and the Lord will just say, you need to marry someone of the opposite gender. You have that attraction, and just more and more pray that God would bury those other desires, and they might not ever fully go away until you die or the Lord returns, but they will be something that Jesus more tamps down and causes you to ignore and not focus upon. And in some cases, those who are, in the L or the G category, who just have very strong, very innate attractions to the same gender from the time they were very young and have had zero attraction to the opposite gender. In many cases, many of those people will become Christians and God would ask you to be celibate. I understand how unbelievably difficult that might sound, but again, the Christian life is difficult. You can go back and watch session 2 of this. God is not asking a difficult Christian life just for you. A lot of times people try to portray like we're just trying to act like, most Christians get to have this wonderful Christian life, but those who have coming out of this community have to have a really, no. All Christians are going to have a very difficult Christian life. And God uses those difficulties to draw us ever closer to himself. And we're not all going to have the same difficulties, all right? A lot of people that claim to be part of this community today, though, I'm telling you, many of them, especially among women, these are just what the stats show. This isn't like Dan's opinion, are in the bi category. And so God is saying you can still get married. You can still go according to some of your desires and just try to, have God help you sanctify those sinful desires. But even those who are in the very strong L and G category, we're not saying you can't be saved. We're not saying that you have to get married in the biblical sense before you can be saved. No. Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 7 that there are celibate Christians in the church. They're not the norm. God expects most Christians to get married and to stay married until either one or both spouses die. That is the norm in the Christian life, but it's not the only godly position that a person can live out. That there are people who will struggle with same-sex desires for their whole life, even as a Christian. But I do want to say that if you're a true Christian, these desires will become less and less strong over time. God will sanctify all of us. I'm not saying he will always give those who are really strong in the L or G category, will completely deliver them from those things in this life. No, many times he asks them to be celibate, okay? So I just want to say, I'm trying to be as respectful as I can. I really am, but I just want to say, I don't really recognize any of these categories, and I know that's just like anathema in our culture right now. How dare you say that? But these are not biblical categories, and for those of you guys who might not be familiar with that, they're just not. The Bible might not use this exact language, but the more theologically accurate language would be those who struggle with same-sex attraction or desires or feelings for the T, okay, category of a very strong feeling that you wish you were the opposite gender, all right? And the Bible would say, no, you're not the opposite gender. We should not lie about that. We should not say something that is not in accordance with reality, but that we do recognize you might really struggle with feelings of wanting to be the other gender. All right. I do not deny that. And if there are Christians out there who deny that and just act like you're trying to make things up, that I don't agree with that. I think it's a very harsh position. I don't think that's the position of most Christians today. Maybe it was 10, 15, 20 years ago when there was just not as much understanding about these things. I think most people who, not most, because it's become more popular, especially in the younger generations, but I think plenty of people genuinely do have strong feelings that they wish they were the opposite gender. That doesn't mean you actually are the opposite gender. It does not mean you should pursue that. From a biblical perspective, God would simply say those are sinful desires that he can deliver you from. He might not deliver you from them all at once in an instant, the moment you're saved, but he will slowly sanctify you, and over time, might be over a lot of times, might be over 10, 20, 30 years, cause you to be more comfortable in your own skin, in the gender in which he created you. And when you go to heaven, you will be fully comfortable in the gender that you are. And you might be like, I didn't think we have gender in heaven. I thought we're just all become angels. That's not what the Bible teaches. It's not what the Bible teaches. We will remain in the gender in which God created us. We'll talk more about that later, okay? So I just want to be clear, I'm at an hour mark, so I got to kind of go quick here. I just want to be clear, very, very clear, that I do not hate anybody who claims to be LGBTQ plus at all. I just don't. I'm not saying I love all people equally, because I don't know all people, but I do try to love people, and I genuinely want to see people saved. And I can definitely say, in all honesty, that I love people in that way. And I just want to say, not just about LGBTQ, but I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, you don't have to believe me, I just hate all prejudice. I just absolutely hate it. I hate racism. I hate sexism. I hate homophobia, like genuine, true, like hatred, persecution, making fun of the LGBTQ community. I want no part of it. That's not biblical. That's not how Jesus would treat such people at all. And so if you say, well, your political views by definition make you racist, I just disagree. And if you want to say, that I'm just delusional, that I just don't see the connection, that my political views really hurt minorities, okay, fine, that's fair. You can take that position. I'm not going to see that as super judgmental. But if you want to say, I know my heart, that I truly am just racist, I don't buy that. Even if you want to say, no, we're not saying you're like overtly racist, you're just implicitly racist or ignorantly racist. I'm telling you, I have known and been very close with people from almost all races, been very close with many women. I don't hate people in the other races. I do not hate other genders. And I know people will be like, just because you're friends with like a black person doesn't mean you're not racist. I get that that's true. I get that there's white people who might have had black friends and still think that white people are superior. I get that. I'm just saying I don't believe that. I absolutely, wholeheartedly reject any notion that one race is superior to another. I wholeheartedly reject any notion that either gender is superior to the other. You don't have to believe me. I don't know what else to say other than to tell you the truth. And if my political views really are harmful to minorities, that is certainly not my intent or my heart. I actually think that over the past 60 years, the Democratic Party has been woefully bad for minorities. And I think that if the Republican Party could get rid of some of these bad elements, like the Nick Fuentes, not that he's like trying to be Republican, but a lot of people who follow Nick Fuentes who kind of tend to, who want a place in the Republican Party. We could get rid of those elements. If we could clean up the Republican Party, I would be happy to be a registered Republican again and start working towards making America a better place for all of us, for all of the races. And I'm not here, sometimes Christians, because we so hate wokeism, we're so against wokeism, I think sometimes we can get a little over the top in trying to act like, white people and black people have had it the same in this country and it's all equal. I was a history teacher for 10 years. I'm well aware of the prejudice and the hurdles that the black community, I'm not saying I've personally experienced them, please don't misunderstand me, but from a historical perspective that they have experienced, I just don't agree that liberal policies are the solution. I just don't. I think that they actually exacerbate the problems that minorities, especially the black community, is facing in our country. I understand that, in conservative circles, Ronald Reagan is almost like Messiah level, which is just ridiculous. Reagan was a great man in many respects, did a lot of great things, but he had some racist tendencies. He really did. And, there were some policies that took place in his administration that really hurt black people. And a lot of conservatives just don't want to recognize or talk about. So I understand it's not just slavery that is hurt. It was segregation, it was Jim Crow, it was some of the policies of the Reagan administration. And I just wish the Republican Party would fully clean up its act so that minorities wouldn't feel so out of place in the Republican Party. And I think, because I truly believe that conservative principles are what will help all people in this country to move forward. So I just want you to know that's my heart. You don't have to agree with my views on politics or whatever. I will say this. We can disagree with a lot of things on politics, but it's wrong when some people try to act like politics never have to do with essentials. That's not true. I know there are some people who try to say you can be pro-choice and be a Bible-believing Christian. That's not true. That is a lie. I'm sorry. You might not want to hear that. You might be offended by that. That is a lie. One of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not murder. And I'm sorry, but the termination of a pregnancy falls under that category. And especially it's being done to the most innocent among us. The idea that Jesus would be okay with that is blasphemy. It just is. And we need to be okay with calling things like they are. We need to be okay with calling balls and strikes. You cannot say that Jesus is okay with the murder of the most innocent among us. That's not a doctrine that Bible-believing Christians can hold. Now, I understand that there are pro-life Democrats. They're becoming less and less because the Democratic Party is really not that into pro-life. It's really not. It's very pro-choice. And so I understand that they still exist. So if you are pro-life and therefore you believe the Bible and you vote Democrat, I strongly disagree with you, but I'm not going to call you a heretic. But I just want to be clear that just because I believe that some Democrats are true Christians and are saved, that doesn't mean that every political argument is only about a secondary issue. Some of these things have to do with essentials, okay? Or like LGBT stuff. You cannot be a true Christian and believe that you can continue to live an openly homosexual lifestyle and have openly homosexual relationships or be in a quote-unquote gay marriage. You cannot believe those things and be a Bible-believing Christian, okay? All right. I do need to move into the Bible translation issue before this video starts going way too long. I'm already 6 minutes over an hour, so I'm going to go quick. I do want to say that in this channel, I am going to be using what is known as the WEB translation, okay? Which is short for World English Bible. And I want to say this is not my favorite translation. And you might be like, bro, you're making no sense. Why would you use a translation that's not your faith? It's because it's in the public domain. That's the only reason. That's the only reason. And if you don't know what that means, it just means that it's not copyrighted, and therefore I don't have to fight against a publisher or YouTube or anything to go through the Bible verse by verse. Pastors can go through the Bible verse by verse because they have different qualifications and stuff for pastors with Bible publishers. As a YouTuber, I can't do that. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of just not more regular YouTubers don't just go through the Bible verse by verse. So you should just be aware of that. I'm not saying it's a bad translation. I'm not saying it's a heretical translation, otherwise I wouldn't use it. It's just got some older English to it, not as antiquated as the King James. If you don't know what that is, you can look up the King James and read some of it. That's much more older English, but it is still older English. And so I just want you to understand, as my audience, there are times where it's going to sound kind of clunky. And I just want you to roll with me. I'll try to explain kind of like a better way of understanding it in English when it gets kind of clunky. But it is what it is, all right? If you don't have the World English Bible, that's okay. You can go to Bible Gateway, simply Google Bible Gateway, and you can go to that website, and you can go to, it has where you can click on the version, and if you go all the way down to the bottom, because it starts with W, you will find the World English Bible. Here's my recommendation to you. for my audience, okay? There are lots of good English translation. There's some really bad ones. There's some ones you want to stay away from. Let me be clear. The Message, quote unquote Bible, or the New World Translation of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Passion Translation, these were all put together by heretics, all right? They overtly and knowingly changed the translations from the original Greek and Hebrew into bad, and they were just being dishonest. If you're like, that's just your opinion, well, let me give you one example. Charles Taze Russell is the founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and he was found guilty in a court of law for doing what I just accused him of doing. He pretended to be a translator, and it was found out he didn't know any Greek or Hebrew. I have been very honest about the fact I am not a Greek scholar, I am not a Hebrew scholar, but I have studied the languages, okay, and I certainly, just as a theologian, have looked at what those who are scholars, whether they're Christian or not Christian, have said about the various translations. And so I can tell you those that are just blatantly out of bounds, okay? But there's other translations that are not my favorite. Like the King James was a great translation. It was wonderful. It served the church wonderfully for a very long time. I know a lot of Christians disagree with me on this because they say, no, it is the only translation we can use because it was so used in the English world for so long. Some have other arguments, but that's the gist of it. I just don't think that's, God wants his people to understand the word. And most people don't speak Old English anymore, especially in America. So I think it's silly to use the King James translation. So it was a great translation for a long time. It's not a great translation for most Christians to use today. And there's other translations that are not my favorite. But let me give you just a quick rundown of some good translations that you can use if you're new to Christianity or new to the Bible, okay? I would say the NASB, you can look up, because I'm trying to go quick here, do not want to go anywhere close to as long as I did in my last session. The NASB, the ESV, the NIV, okay, the LSB, and the NLT. I think are all good translations. Some would disagree with me. Some would say the NLT tries to overly simplify things too much. The NSB might be pushing it a little bit and kind of using more technical or scholarly sounding English. But I think in general, you're pretty safe with these translations. I don't agree with how they translate everything in every instance, but overall, they're pretty good translations. The NASB and the ESV are going to sound like more sophisticated English. The LSB is kind of in the middle of the road there, and then the NIV and the NLT are more trying to translate the Bible for those who might not be the most educated, okay? So you kind of pick where you're at as far as your ability to understand the English language and pick one of those translations accordingly. Here's my recommendation. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. My recommendation would be to pick one of those translations, either get yourself a physical Bible or read from Bible Gateway. There's nothing wrong with reading from Bible Gateway, despite what some people might say. That's a legalistic position, just being real. I would read the chapter that I say that I'm going to go over, the section that I'm going to go over in the next session. I would read that from one of these beforehand, so you kind of have the language that's more understandable in your mind, and then just follow along with me on the World English Bible on Bible Gateway. And I think if you do that, it will be much more helpful. Whereas if you just only go by the World English Bible, some of the language might be clunky. Here and there I might say, yeah, it probably should be more said like this. Again, I'm not saying that they ever blatantly twisted the Bible here. I am just saying that there's language that just oftentimes doesn't sound like the English that most Americans use today, especially those in the audience that I'm most trying to reach with this channel that are new or very young to Christianity and might not have a lot of academic background, might not have a lot of background in the Bible or Christianity in general. So I apologize that that's not the smoothest way to do things, but I do think that that will be the best, okay? If you want more information on any of these translations or this translation, where it came from, so on and so forth, by all means research that, but I just want you to know that. I have read through the World English Bible very carefully, and while the language is kind of antiquated, it can be clunky at times, it is a very, very solid translation as far as accuracy goes. I mean, like there's a couple places where I'm like, I'm not sure I would translated it that way, and there's some textual issues that I'm not going to get into in this channel because that just is more complicated than what I'm trying to do with this channel. But please, if you're like, he's acting like it's just a matter of translation, there's textual issues, I'm well aware of those things. As I've said in previous sessions, please, please, please bear in mind the audience that I'm most trying to reach with this channel, okay? I think one of the biggest criticisms I'm going to get with this channel is people saying he's oversimplifying or he doesn't know what he's talking about just because I don't bring up something. I'm trying to help people understand the basics, and for those who want to go deeper, you can go to my website. And I'm not saying my website is perfect or shows that I'm this great theologian or apologist. I think if you read through a number of my articles, you'll quickly see, or if you read my book that I responded to from a theologian, a progressive Christian one named Randall Rouser, you'll see that I know a lot more than you probably give me credit for, because this channel is trying to keep things very simple. So, World English Bible is definitely not an inaccurate translation. And so that is the translation I'm going to use. Like I said, you don't need to buy that translation. You can just go to Bible Gateway and read along with me. All right. So with that, introductory section is done, and I'm so happy that it's done. I am so sorry that session 5, the last session, was 2 hours and 10 minutes long. Awful, horrible, evil. I'm sorry. Not okay. I did not mean to go that long. I didn't realize I was going that long. So I really tried to cut things down today. But I am actually glad, even though we did that 2-hour session, that we got these done in 6 sessions rather than 7 or 8. And I hope that this introductory section has really kind of helped you understand what I'm about, what this channel is about, and how I'm going to approach things. So as I said earlier, we're going to go over 4 major themes, 5 overarching sections. We're already done with the first one, introduction. 4 overarching themes that really will help you have a pretty good understanding of the general gist of the Bible. You will be shocked that if you really stick with me over these next number of episodes, we go through these 4 themes, even if you've never read the Bible at all, I will help you I'll give you some advice, some things that you can do that you will go from being like a total novice to having a pretty solid basic grasp of the Bible and Christianity and the Christian faith. I've been doing this a long time. You will be surprised. It doesn't mean you can't learn a lot more, but you'd be surprised. So we're going to go over Bible, God, salvation, and then heresy. And you'll have in just a few sessions, a really solid working understanding of what the Bible is, what it's about, what its major themes are. And then as you read it for yourself, as you hear it preached and read and taught in church, and as I go over it verse by verse in this channel, you will already be way ahead of the game, and it will just make going through every verse, every chapter so much easier. That doesn't mean you're not going to get stumped. I still get stumped. The greatest theologians of all time, who are far greater than I am, have gotten stumped, but you'll have a really solid understanding. So thank you so much for persevering through this introductory section. I think you will find the next 4 sections so much more fun, so much more enjoyable, and I'm really excited to get to those. So let's do it.